Um, maybe let's start off with, how did you find yourself in Asia? Like an Australian entrepreneur, what attracted you to Asia of all places?
Well, it actually started in a few years back when I had a gap year out of school. Didn't really want to do the whole Europe thing and the 6 week Contiki and go home. And I was interested in. I've always just had been kind of drawn to Southeast Asia, at least since a family trip I did when I was 15 to Vietnam.
Yep.
And from that point after school, yeah, I thought I'd come over here. Told a couple of mates they thought they'd come too. And I ended up spending 5 months just traveling around mainly Indochina and just living like absolute cheap, 1,000 Aussie dollars a month, going
Yep.
around, drinking too much, seeing a lot of stuff, and pretty much just really fell in love with the region. And from there, went back to Oz, went to uni for a bit, and then just missed the region and all that, and pretty much had a goal of coming back out here and living here indefinitely. And for that, the means to an end was web design at the start. So I started doing, the classic kind of freelancing, all that kind of
Yep.
things, marketing and all that. So was doing that for about a year and was doing all right and all that. But then, yeah, I got more interested in the region, and I'm kind of I like stability and all that. And being out here, it's one. I really like the idea of just living on a tourist visa all the time.
Yeah.
Using your crappy Australian debit card to take your money out of the ATM and having to pay $10 on the withdrawal fee plus bank fees and all that. So I slowly started getting myself into the whole realm of things like bank accounts, things like driver's licenses, things like just finding good monthly rentals. Because out here, for instance, like in Thailand, the discount on a monthly rental as opposed to night is 70-80%. So it's
Wow.
significant. And yeah, that's pretty much how it started, I guess. Yeah.
Gotcha. And the way that I found you, mate, was I was looking at a whole bunch of content in the geo-arbitrage like sector, stuff like Nomadic Capitalist, and I found some of your content. You seem to have turned what was a problem for you into a business now in Asia. Tell me a little bit more about offshore in Asia.
Well, yeah, that's pretty much what it was. It was us, that being Aaron and I. We both came out here independently of one another, met in a co-working space, and pretty much just started chatting about how to make life easier over here, how
Mm,
to shortcut through things. Because yeah, there's lots of bureaucracy, there's lots of red tape to get around, and if you can manage it, your life gets a lot easier here, a lot
mhm.
quicker, and a lot cheaper as well. So we were talking about this amongst ourselves, what we've each sorted out, yeah, and then we went out and tried to do a few other things. Like one of the first things we did was try to open a bank account in Thailand,
Yep.
and we both tried a few different things. Not everything worked, and eventually figured it out. And it kind of got to the point where we were just discussing the general like our own day-to-day lives and how to make it better. We kind of realized that there's probably a market here. If this is helping us, we can probably use it to help other people.
Yep.
And that's pretty much how Offshore in Asia got started. And then since then, I think the YouTube channel has been where most people have seen us.
Yep.
Generally speaking, it's been on the website and all that, but a lot of it is the videos that expose people to what we do. And yeah, it's been pretty good. It's been fun and interesting having a unique business model. We don't really, people ask like, oh, who are your competitors? They don't really have any. Like there's like this guy might do a bit of that and that guy does a bit of this, but no one else really does exactly what we do,
Yeah.
which keeps it interesting and it's quite fun. But yeah, that's the general idea of offshore in Asia. And at this point, the idea is generally if you're from outside of the region, you want to move to Southeast Asia,
Hmm.
you come to us and we can make that a lot easier from a consulting perspective, helping you understand your options, then actually implementing it between us and our network, helping people come out here and just making it a lot easier.
Tell me about the markets that you specialize in Asia.
So I'd say probably 80% at least of what we do as far as like individual clients, families as well, couples, whatever, is Thailand and Malaysia.
Hmm.
They seem to fit the mold of just about everyone. They have the best as far as like just everyone thinks about like straight away think beaches, food, whatnot. But as far as
Yeah.
actually like living here, you've got like visas. Having a good visa is super important, very important.
Yeah.
And then you've got things such as banking. Then you've got just healthcare and all these things. Those two countries seem to fit the mold the best for the most people. A lot of people are interested. Like you hear a lot of people before they read into it. Oh yeah, I'm looking to retire in Vietnam. It's like would be nice, but they don't have a retirement visa. You can retire
Yes.
there for like 3 months a year, then they're going to kick you out. And you're going to do a border run. It's not going to really work. So yeah, a
Yep.
lot of it comes down to the pragmatics, and Malaysia and Thailand seem to do pretty well for most people. There's a bit in the Philippines and Bali that
Yep.
also works, but it seems that there definitely is a heavy weight towards certain countries. That's for sure. Yeah.
Gotcha. Visas are so important, and to be honest, that's
Yeah.
how we found you. Because I was thinking forward in terms of in 2 years' time, my wife and I are going to fire. We're either going to bounce around and be nomads and stay like 1 or 2 months in every country, or we need to find a base somewhere. And so I was trying to solve a problem for the future.
Yeah.
And you made a really good point about Vietnam. You could retire in Vietnam for 3 months, and that was a bonus because it used to be 1 month, like
Yeah.
3 months ago. They've only
Yeah.
just recently upped the ante. Now, you've taken the time to put together a fantastic summary sheet, which I deeply appreciate. What I'll do is I'll throw that up on the screen. If you
Yeah.
could
Go for
maybe
it.
maybe walk through country by country and talk about the pros and cons of each of these specific markets. Let me
Yeah.
bring that up
Absolutely.
right now. Okay. So you mentioned Thailand's a favorite. Maybe start off with Thailand.
Yeah. Awesome. So with Thailand, I'd say the general benefits of Thailand that most people find is I think visas are a massive one. The visa situation in Thailand compared to basically everywhere else in the Southeast is like fantastic. There's probably 12 or 15 visas. A lot of them are very specific to individuals, but you still have a huge variety there. If you're over 50,
Hmm.
they've got three, kind of four in a way, but three retirement visas. Two of them in particular is like generally the best options for most people, but the visa situation's great. If you're under 50, there's the elite visa.
Yep.
Just very recent, like this week, there's been changes. It's
They made
gone
some
from
changes. Yeah.
up. It's gone up that 50% in cost.
Yep.
Nevertheless, it's still a good option for a lot of people who have the money. You've got the LTR, you've got there's obviously like things like spouse visas and business visas if you're married or working over here that
Mm.
are popular with people in those situations. But you have lots of options. So you can see I've kind of gone down a list, and this is my own personal, fairly brief, just summary of each country. And before everyone gets, argues, oh, it's actually more expensive in Thailand now than it used to be. Yeah, granted, but it depends where you are.
Mm.
If you're staying in Ceylon in Bangkok, it's
Hmm.
going to be expensive just because it's the same as if you're staying in the middle of Sydney as opposed to out in, Adelaide or something, or like in some country town. Nevertheless, cost of living in Thailand is low, and I think the quality is pretty good relative to other countries. I'd say
Yep.
Malaysia is probably the best in terms of
Yeah.
value for money, the higher level that you get. But nevertheless, Thailand can probably be done as cheap as any other country on this list.
Yep.
And that comes with the benefits of having slightly better infrastructure than a lot of other places. And it's a bit easier to work around with a lot of things because you have so many resources here because there's such a
Mm.
huge expat community, such a huge, and then breaking it down even, you've got so many retirees, so many nomads, so many, like
Mm.
expats actually working here that there's so many visa agents, there's so many different people that can help you with things. That makes it pretty easy.
Gotcha.
The cons, I would say the language is one. English
Yeah.
isn't as widely spoken as other countries. If you're
Hmm.
going to be here for mid to long term, learning Thai is probably, although a lot of people don't do it, I personally say it's essential if you want to really maximize your quality of life over here. Because if you can communicate with the average person in a country you're living in day to day, it's going to make it a lot easier than doing like the whole sign language thing. Like it's not
Yes.
worth it. But as far as if you're a nomad, so the kind of, I guess, largely the crowd of savvy investor, so nomads, people kind of looking to retire early, whatnot, probably a pretty good bet. The co-working scene, the Wi-Fi, and all that's great. So if you're working, it's really good. There's people looking to keep working maybe, but just move out here. There's
Mm.
quite a lot of jobs for English teachers in Thailand. Um, obviously the pay is not good as back home, but that's the choice that quite a lot of people make, and I've met a few people out here who do that. If you've got plenty of options, obviously, if you're over 50, the
Yep.
retirement visas there, and then a lot of people come out here and retire early. Like I live in Chang Mai at the moment, and there'd have to be probably maybe hundreds, no, more than that, probably a couple thousand retirees. Just guessing, it's kind of hard to say. It's pretty spread out, but nevertheless, a lot of people out here. Um, And yeah, looking at the other points, infrastructure and safety in Thailand's good.
Yeah.
Obviously, like most of Southeast Asia, road safety is pretty average. That's why it's not. I haven't listed it as excellent.
Yeah.
But day to day, like violent crime, especially against foreigners, is lower here than in Australia. When you look at the statistics, and that goes for actually the pretty much every country in Southeast Asia. If you look at things like the homicide rate, for instance,
Mm.
it's slower than Australia. So there's that factor, which is something that's nice to dispel.
Mm.
Start of the conversation, because you hear one of the first things people always get worried about is their personal safety.
Yeah.
And walking around day to day here, I feel safer than when I'm in Australia. I'm from outside of Melbourne, pretty safe area, but nevertheless, it's just this level of calm here that you don't really get in Australia. But yeah, that's probably what I'd say for Thailand. I think a lot of it's going to go for other countries. I'm happy to move on to Malaysia if you've got any questions about Thailand.
Before you do, the one thing that I noticed that's very different about Thailand is the healthcare. You've ranked that as very good. So it sounds like that would be a good place for older people who are retiring or pre-retiree.
Yes, actually, I forgot to mention that. The healthcare in Thailand is a very interesting one, because that's the other thing people think. Like, what am I going to do if I get sick? It's like, oh,
Mm.
you're probably going to celebrate. Like, if you're, well, not celebrate, you're probably going to be pretty happy that you're in a place like this. Being from Australia, as most of us probably watching this are, obviously there's Medicare. So a lot of people, if they get
Yeah.
sick, just go home.
Go
That's fair
home.
enough.
Yeah.
But just as far as if you're not from Australia watching this, you don't have public health care, like a lot of people from the States, for
States.
instance,
Yeah.
you can get private health cover over here for anywhere from 1 to 2,000 Aussie a
Mm.
year, and that's going to cover you for like a large amount of serious illnesses.
Hmm.
And especially the private hospitals here are of very good quality. And it's interesting. You even look at the rankings globally for the best countries by healthcare, but and it depends, because there's two kind of ways how they rank it. Some will consider cost and some won't. When cost isn't considered, Thailand's like 40 to 60 roughly. When cost is considered, it ranks around like 15, a lot of the other metrics, as far as
Mm.
like best countries in the world, because it is considerably cheaper than a lot of other places. Actually, as a fun fact, has the cheapest medication in the world.
Really?
I think, tied with Egypt. Branded and non-branded medication here is as cheap as it gets. So
Wow.
that's really good too. So if you're someone, again, if you're in the States or elsewhere where you're paying a lot of money for medication, coming out here is going to be a cost you're going to save pretty quickly. So yeah,
Yeah.
that's why it's been listed as very good. Obviously, it's like if you have some sort of emergency illness or long-term illness, you might be better off if you were living in Australia or whatnot.
Yeah.
Nevertheless, like as far as places go out here, it's a pretty good system, really. And yeah, I would list that's hence why I've listed it as very good.
Yeah. One scary fun fact I stumbled across was somewhere between 25 and 40% of personal bankruptcies in America are caused by private health. So, people get older, they have some event, might be cancer, might be a heart attack, and just the health bills just completely wipe them out, which is like
Yeah,
scary.
yeah,
It
it
makes
is.
me incredibly grateful for like a country like Australia.
Yeah, definitely. There's actually this. I'm sure you personally know, but there's quite a big medical tourism industry over here. They actually
Oh
have a
yeah,
medical tourism visa that you can get. So like, yeah,
really?
it's so popular. They created the visa for it. And even say cosmetic procedures or dental procedures, you can come out here. Obviously, dental being one of the few things that isn't covered in Australia under Medicare.
Yeah.
That's one of the things that a lot of people come out here for. When I'm over here for my, maybe 8, 9 months of the year or whatever, the last thing I do is I always go to the dentist here, because I can pay, about 30 Aussie for a full checkup and clean, a bit more thorough than what I've had in Australia too. Or I
Yeah.
can go back to Australia and pay, I don't even remember anymore, like $200, something like that. But regardless, I just get that done here, because it's one of those things, if you can arbitrage it, why not? So
Oh yeah, I'm a big fan of arbitraging pretty much anything I can
yeah.
where I can. Um, I wanted to get a sense for you in terms of costs. You kind of like put them all roughly low across the board.
Yeah, I haven't been very helpful there,
Across the
granted.
board. I wanted to get your thoughts on this data. Is it
Yeah.
consistent with your experience? So
Assuming this is US dollars.
this is yes, this would be US dollars.
Yeah, yeah, okay. I think it's for Bangkok, it looks pretty standard. I guess that'd be like 1,400 Aussie roughly around that, which seems to be what most people spend. The funny thing, especially with Thailand in particular, it depends really much like very much on where you are. Like say
Gotcha.
that, $1,400 in Bangkok's probably pretty standard. I think for the same lifestyle in Chiang Mai, you could probably spend, $800, $900 because things like rent and even food, like food here, you might go to like a local restaurant and pay
Yep.
30 baht, 40 baht for a meal. So that's $1.50, $2 for a meal Australian.
Yep.
Bangkok, you're hard pressed to find something for 70, 80 baht. So foods even like that's just going to be doubled like that. So
Gotcha.
yeah, I think for Bangkok that looks pretty fair. But it just depends very much on your own personal lifestyle. There's this ridiculous debate of can you live on Thailand at $1,000? You hear people talk about a lot. And
I don't think I could.
the it's the stupid question because yes, you can. I mean, look at the average income of a Thai. It's under $1,000 US. So I'm pretty
So it's
sure you
doable.
can do it because
Yeah.
like the large share of 70 million people are. So I think you'll be right.
I think a better question would be what would be a recommended amount for someone who's used to a Western standard of living? So, would 2 to 3,000 Aussie be sufficient to retire comfortably?
Yeah, I reckon if you were Bangkok, Phuket, yeah, you could live on that. They're a bit more expensive, those areas. You could live on that, and still be able to, eat out every meal and do this and that. If you're outside of those areas, say if you're up north or
Yeah.
somewhere outside of the whole Bangkok or very touristy islands, you could easily live on that. Like if you're spending 3,000 Aussie a month,
Yeah.
and you've got a long-term rental and you've got, maybe you've bought your own motorbike or whatever, you've probably got like, $2,000 of fun money after your $1,000 of like necessary expenses. Like
It's a lot of
some
fun.
people like it varies. The cost of living of foreigners over here is ridiculous how much it varies. Like I know a dude who spends twice as much as what I spend on a month just on his apartment, but he doesn't care. It's still, for him, it's still nothing. So it
Yeah.
just depends on the individual. But yeah, if you've got anything more than I'd say, like to be very conservative, like 1,500 Aussie a month, you're gonna be fine here. Like
Okay. Gotcha. Okay, let's go over to Malaysia. Pros and cons.
awesome. All right. So cost of living, I said low as well. Like I've been vague with the cost of living because it just varies so much between location and what the individual does.
Yeah.
For instance, if you're like you like to go out and drink a fair bit, Thailand and Malaysia are going to be a lot more expensive than most of other places in Southeast Asia. Like a beer in Thailand might like a long neck might cost you $2. I think Malaysia probably about the same, maybe a tad more. If
Yep.
you go to like Laos or Cambodia or Vietnam, it's going to cost $1. So
Mm.
for nightlife and things like that, certain countries, your cost of living is going to be a lot more. Malaysia is one of them. I think certain people, it's going to be a bit more expensive, but it's probably in a similar ballpark of Thailand as a whole. I'll get some numbers up right now because Aaron is currently spending a couple of months in Kuala Lumpur. So he's paying 1,500 ringgit for an air conditioned room, which comes out to about 500 Aussie a month. And he was paying 1,200 ringgit, so 400 Aussie for a fan room. Co-working is costing him just under 500 ringgit a month, so that's about 150 Aussie, and that comes with unlimited coffee and free beer, which is kind of
Free beer.
ridiculous, really. Yeah. So, and yeah, the dinners are a pretty similar amount. You're going to be paying around, anywhere from $1 to $2 for the real cheap places. Like if you're getting like a roti chennai or something, like I remember seeing them for like 3 to 5 ringgit. Like from when I was there, just a couple of years back, I haven't been for a while. Nevertheless, if you're eating like local food, it's still extremely cheap.
I paid $7 in
Community,
Sydney for that.
yeah. I'd say the expat community is a bit different. So like Thailand, you've got a bit of everything. Like you have the stereotypical expats in Thailand, which do exist and they are around. Probably don't need to like go into full details of what the people back home think of them, but nevertheless, they're around. Malaysia. A lot of people there tend to, kind of like, well, the one thing a lot of clients will say is, oh, I like Thailand, but I want to live somewhere civilized. And then they always say, so Malaysia, which Malaysia, yeah, civilized. It's very, whatever you find that as, but nevertheless, it's a bit cleaner, it's a bit more tame and whatnot. But parts of Thailand are like that. I think a lot of people go on a holiday to Phuket, go to Patong Road and go, I couldn't live here. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, no one could. Like,
Yeah, I
but
know what you mean.
nevertheless, Malaysia's quite a bit more tame. I think the lifestyle, if you're a bit more, what's the word? I've tried to describe this before, and there's no word that doesn't offend anyone. But if you're a bit more like, if you're a bit more, if you like the more kind of like refined things, maybe a bit more
Yes.
mature, not in like not people who live in Thailand like myself are like not mature, but if you like a bit more like
Creature
um,
comforts.
creature comforts, yeah, and you
Yeah.
like a bit more order. I think order is probably the
Mm.
best way to describe it.
Yeah.
Malaysia's a bit more orderly. Like it's not quite as crazy on the roads. It's a bit cleaner.
Yeah.
Things just seem to work a little bit better as far as Southeast Asia.
Yeah.
That isn't Singapore. I think Malaysia's the most like kind of westernized, I guess is probably the right word. Like
Yeah.
it just things just work a little bit better there. Like, say for instance, if you go to extend a visa in Thailand, you've got to bring like 20 pieces on, right, 10 pieces of paper, and you got to like line up here, and then they'll move you here, and you got to go back and forth and that. And it's the
Yep.
same in a lot of other countries. Malaysia's kind of just things work a bit better.
Mhm.
Also, there's some more like the finer aspects of it being a former British colony. You have the
Mm.
common law system, which some people like the idea of in case they would get in trouble. You
Mm.
have, it's the English language, the English efficiency there is very good. Like,
Yep.
Brits list is excellent. Like, pretty much everyone speaks English there, and they speak it very well.
Yep.
People are really nice there. I found there's kind of this word is you've been there, right?
Yeah. I went there last
Yeah, yeah.
July.
Right, yeah, yeah. You kind of have this thing, you go to like the hawker centers and the food stalls, and people
Mm.
just sit down and start chatting to you all the
Yep.
time, which is really cool. People are really nice there too. I think again, like Thailand and Malaysia, if you like either of them is a pretty good bet for most people.
Mm.
The infrastructure is excellent there. Again, that's another thing that it has over basically everywhere else in Southeast Asia.
Hmm.
Traveling around there on the roads, it is probably better than the roads in Australia. It's a bit more orderly. Like Thailand, the roads are actually pretty good outside of like the little like alleyways and all that, but people still
Yep.
drive crazy. Malaysia's a bit more chill. Kuala Lumpur, as far as the Southeast Asia goes, the public transport's really good. Getting around's a lot easier. Like,
Yep.
you've got the what they call it there, but like the Sky Rail, MRT or whatever it's called. Anyway, you
Mm.
can get around there a bit easier than most places. But to be fair, Aaron's probably better want to talk about Malaysia, but right now, but I'm here, so this is what we got. Safety's
Do you
great.
do you find the
It's
digital nomad community is bigger in Malaysia, given the infrastructure seems better and they speak English?
not as much as Thailand.
Interesting.
Yeah, I think a lot of the digital nomad community is kind of drawn to the romantic kind of adventure
Beaches.
of Southeast Asian beaches and whatnot.
Yeah.
Which, granted, Malaysia has great beaches, but
Mm.
I think Bali and Thailand get the lion's share of the nomads, particularly the younger ones.
Yep.
Because yeah, most people who are going nomadic are doing it not usually for geoarbitrage reasons specifically, but they're doing it to, it's usually a lifestyle thing or an adventure
Mm.
thing. And there's a bit more of a romantic kind of fun notion of going to Thailand or Bali.
Gotcha.
But in saying that, Malaysia is a great option for nomads, especially if you want somewhere that just works better. Because you say
Yeah.
you've got the Roundtail Nomad Pass, a fairly new visa that Malaysia's released that is actually for digital nomads. It's the
Yep.
only one bar the LTR visa in Thailand, which is really, really hard to qualify for. But the Roundtail Nomad Pass requires 2,000 US dollars a month. And if you can prove that and show like at least a 3-month contract or proof that you're working for someone else,
Hmm.
you can get in for 1 year and extend it for another year. So you just get 2 years there, totally in the clear, work rights and all that. You can work online there. It's
That's
a
pretty good.
really good option, and it's quite easy from what I've heard. Like, it's bit of steps to apply for. Once you get it, it's just worth the effort. So that's a good
Yeah.
option there. The Roundtail Nomad Pass, that is. We've got video on that, and there's a blog about that on our website you can check out. That's a
Great.
great option for anyone looking to get a digital nomad visa. And I guess on the topic of visas, the other ones that are quite common in Malaysia is the MM2H.
Yep.
It's the Malaysia My Second Home.
Hmm.
There's that, and then the Sarawak kind of offshoot visa, which is also
Yep.
that's the Sarawak My Second Home visa. So the MM2H, basically the idea is you make a deposit, like a bank deposit, and do a few other things to show that you're more or less serious about the country.
Hmm.
And then you can stay there. You can bring along dependents. That can be a spouse. That can be children. It can also be parents for the Sarawak, but that I haven't seen it done, but it says they include parents as well. So,
Okay.
look into it, but it's an option for a lot of people that can be a good one. There's changes coming to MM2H visas soon. Though there's proposed changes coming soon. We don't know what exactly, but considering that applications have dropped by 90% since they made it more difficult to apply for the high deposit and whatnot,
Yeah.
they're probably going to make it easier. That's the assumption. The changes should be coming pretty soon though, so we just
Okay.
haven't seen.
Tell me a little bit more about Sarawak. So that's not in the main island in Malaysia, is it? It's on the Borneo side?
Yeah, yeah. So it's Borneo, Malaysia, opened sorry, Eastern Malaysia, you'll also hear it called. So that's one of the two states on Borneo,
Yep.
on the Bornean part of the Malaysian part of Borneo. So they've introduced their own program, and the idea is you stay there for at least 30 days of the year,
30
and
days.
then after
Okay.
that you can live in Western Malaysia if you choose. However, there's much lower requirements, both the deposit and the income requirements. However, the caveat with it is, and this is why I kind of I try to make it clear to people that, although yeah, you can do your 30 days and then head over back to KL or whatever, the intention of the visa was to attract more people to Sarawak. And so right now, if you're staying there for 30 days and going back, you're not doing anything wrong legally, but it's not fulfilling the purpose of the
Yep.
visa. And I say this because potentially there's been no talk of it that I know of, but just in my own head, and Aaron and I have discussed this, there's a potential that they could make that 30 days more at some point because it
Yeah.
isn't serving Sarawak's best interest. So I'm a little reluctant, and I'm always make it very clear to clients of the situation with the SMM2H, because who knows what could happen in future.
Gotcha. And what's the infrastructure like on the Sarawak side? Do they have like, as good roads, as good malls, as good hospitals as you see on, like, say for example, Kuala Lumpur?
I haven't been there, so I can't really say.
Okay.
However, it is a lot less populated. It's slightly bigger than Peninsular Malaysia, and I think there's like 2 million of the 30 million people in Malaysia there.
Yep.
So I'd imagine, getting around probably is a little bit more difficult. It's like in Oz, if you're, in Sydney, the Sydney to Melbourne kind of area is a lot more connected than say if you're up in the one out on the west coast or something. So I'd imagine it'd be pretty similar. I'm sure you could probably still get your good quality healthcare and whatnot. I don't know what the infrastructure is like for foreigners though, because you also have that. There are a few agencies out there who just do the Sarawak visas, so
Yep.
you do have people out there to help you and whatnot. But again, Kuching, the biggest city there, is it's nothing compared to Kuala Lumpur. Like Kuala Lumpur is
Yeah.
huge. Kuching's just like a regional capital. So yeah, I can't really say for sure on that one.
The one thing that surprised me when I was researching Malaysia versus Thailand was the cost of living in Malaysia seemed lower. Like, Bangkok 981, Kuala Lumpur 749 for a single
Yeah,
person. That was really surprising.
yeah,
Um,
that's probably pretty right. Kuala Lumpur from Bangkok, it depends on the individual, but they're generally about the same price.
yep,
If not, it's probably a bit cheaper.
yep,
And why a lot of people like KL over Bangkok is because it's a bit more just orderly. Like,
yeah,
you've got the same or maybe even a bit less price. You've got, decent public transport. You've
yeah.
got it's a bit calmer. Like Bangkok's very intense, very noisy.
Yes.
It's a lot. Like, it's an acquired taste and plenty of people do acquire it. But I think KL's probably the most Singapore, the most really kind of like Western city. If you're used to like Melbourne or Sydney,
Mm,
they're cities and all that, but they're not just insane. Like if like you compare Bangkok to somewhere like an Australian city, and it's just you can't even do it. But KL there's a bit more there. So
yeah.
yeah, the KL probably is a bit cheaper than Bangkok, depending on your lifestyle and what you like to do. But yeah, they're surprisingly similar. And even like Phnom Penh is a similar cost to Bangkok and all that. So it's like
Mm,
not all, vast majority of capital cities in Southeast Asia tend to be expensive. Like, have a huge amount of people moving there. Most of them are very prominent. Like I say, Bangkok is like 12 million people that they know of, maybe more with the migrant workers and whatnot.
yep.
And then Chiang Mai, the second biggest, is like 130,000. So it's something like I can't remember the numbers off my head, but it's like 100 and something times bigger.
Yep.
And then like say Phnom Penh's the same. You've got 2 million people. The next biggest city, bang bang, is like, again, it's like 100 or 300,000 or something. So yeah, like staying in any capital city in Southeast, it's going to be like by far the biggest city in the country.
Mm.
And it's going to be a lot busier, a lot more expensive. I guess Vietnam's the exception. You've got two big cities there, but besides that, that's kind of how it goes in most countries.
Mm. Okay, let's go to Bali. So I think most people would know Bali. They would have
Yep.
gone there for a holiday. But are there any key things you'd like to call out?
Yeah. I don't have much to say for Bali. If you're a younger person, I think a lot of people are drawn to there. There's the whole like there's a lot of like a wellness and
Yep.
alternative scene and whatnot. There's a lot of we've got a lot of life coaches. You've got a lot of yoga instructors.
I blame Eat, Pray, Love, that movie.
Yeah, yeah. I blame Instagram.
Yes.
Nevertheless, I've said Bali low to medium because when I've been there, when other people have been there, despite yes, certain things being cheap, it seems most things are just a little more pricey. Like
Yeah.
it's a bit harder to get, just like say for instance in Malaysia or Thailand or even Singapore, you've got access to local food everywhere and it's easy and it's
Yeah.
reliable. Bali, like sometimes it's kind of hard to find a little restaurant out somewhere if you're in a more touristy area.
Yeah.
So sometimes it's just more, it seems to be more unavoidable expenses there than there are in
Yep.
other countries. And for instance, like the infrastructure is I've rated it as poor, which is being
Yeah.
generous.
Yeah.
You've got like basically no public transport. There's
Yes.
like buses that run when they feel like it, from what I know. But besides that, like everyone, it's just taxis and drivers. And if
Yes.
not that, you're on a scooter, which comes with its own set of challenges and risks. So getting around there, if you want to do it cheaply, is difficult. Like when to compare, again, I'm biased, but say being in northern Thailand, you have a
Yeah.
thing called songthaos, like well they call them jeepneys in the Philippines, like
Yeah.
like a ute with a cab on the back, and you sit in the back, and it's 30 baht or like $1.50 to go anywhere in the city. Bali, it's if you want to get around, it's you're renting a scooter month to month,
Yeah.
paying for that, or you're doing yeah, like taxis everywhere. So it's a bit more unavoidable to spend a bit more money there, I find.
Yeah.
But again, some people would disagree. I haven't been outside of the main kind of southern area of Bali, Canggu, Ubud, Uluwatu. I've heard outside of there it gets a lot cheaper, and places like Lombok and like other nearby islands are a lot cheaper
Lombok's
as well.
lovely.
Apparently, really
Yeah.
nice. So
Yeah, it's beautiful. But I see your point about how logistically it is harder to get from place to place in Bali compared to Malaysia and Thailand that has an amazing rail system and infrastructure and
yeah,
very, very different.
yeah, and slower.
Okay.
So
And what?
slower.
And slower. In what
Yeah, the
way?
traffic in Bali is quite
Ah,
horrific. Yeah,
gotcha.
yeah,
Gotcha.
yeah,
Okay, let's go to the Philippines now. I have to confess, the Philippines is on my bucket list. I'm dying to get there. Like there are parts of the Philippines I hear that are kind of like the poor man's Maldives. And
yeah,
so I'm
yeah,
I'm dying to get to the Philippines. Tell me
yeah.
about tell me about the highs and lows,
Tell you about what? Sorry.
the highs and lows of the Philippines, the pros and cons.
All right. Yeah. So again, personally, I haven't been there,
Yep.
but I've dealt with it a lot. It's the one place in Southeast Asia I haven't been, East Timor. Probably not going to go there for in any short, any
Me
near
neither.
anytime soon. But nevertheless, Philippines, yeah, on my bucket list. Certain things I know for a fact. It's very affordable. I think Philippines and Thailand are probably the most affordable places that you can actually get a long-term visa at. Obviously like Lao and Vietnam are cheap, but
Yep.
can't really live there long term. You can in Lao actually, but but not many people do. Philippines, you've got really generous visa situation there. There's not a
Yep.
whole lot of visas, but retirement visas, 50 plus, like pretty much anyone can get them. The requirements are very generous,
Hmm.
well, modest, I guess the word is. You have the tourist visas that I know people can, you can
Oh,
extend
they
that for
just
like a
extended.
year or something even more.
Yeah.
You can just go for years and years and then leave for a couple of days and come back. Like, and for now at least, people are pretty chill with that. So if you want to give the Philippines a go for an indefinite amount of time, it's a
Mm.
pretty friendly option. Um, I know getting around within the Philippines is a lot harder. The infrastructure's not as good there. It's an archipelago, obviously, so uh,
Mm.
you've got to get ferries or short
Yeah.
flights everywhere. My friends who've been there and traveled or lived, it getting around can cost a bit more, just because that's obviously just the the nature of the place. By virtue of being an archipelago, there's those challenges. For that too, the infrastructure is not quite as good. The Wi-Fi is meant to be a bit more patchy and difficult. Again, I'm sure if you're in like Makati in Manila, it's probably going to be slightly better than if you're in Bohol or something like that.
Yeah.
Nevertheless, you've got probably at least reputationally not as good, Wi-Fi and electricity and whatnot as the rest of Southeast. It's also pretty safe. I don't think it's the safest place in Southeast, but it's ranked pretty high as far as all that. Healthcare is meant to be okay, a bit more marginal than say Malaysia or Thailand, but
Yep.
it's meant to be passable. It's not as common for say medical tourism and whatnot, but apparently if you get yourself in trouble, you're still going to be able to like get by or whatever. It's popular with retirees in particular. There's quite a lot of retirees there. There's kind of this friendly rivalry between Thailand and the Philippines. One of the main reasons I want to go, because a lot of people who love Thailand or the Philippines go to the other place and love that too. So yeah,
it's a good sign.
Seems pretty interesting, nevertheless. But yeah, so for the Philippines, yeah, that's probably where I'd put it. That's about all I got to say, really.
I reckon we should have the first Offshore in Asia conference in the Philippines, and sign me up. I'm there.
Yeah, we can tick off all the boxes then.
Yeah, totally. In terms of the cost of living, it seems pretty much line ball, like around that 700 to 900 mark between, all the major cities, Manila, Bangkok, Kuala Lumpur. They're all roughly around about that same price point.
Yeah, I knew how ridiculous it looked putting everything as low for cost of living,
Yeah,
but it really is strangely similar. Even when you factor in, say, like the average income in each country, say Thailand's actually middle income country, makes a lot, and Malaysia, and the average income there is a lot higher than say Indonesia, Philippines, whatnot. Cost of living for some reason still manages to be right around the same.
that's
The only
interesting.
place really is Singapore, where obviously it's expensive as all get out. But besides that, even in Singapore, accommodation is ridiculous, but food's still cheap, which just baffles me. You could still pay, like three Singaporean dollars for a good meal, which is like $3 Aussie. But yeah, for the most of Southeast Asia, yeah, it's a really similar cost of living. If you want to go somewhere cheaper, outside of a capital city is almost always going to be cheaper. Outside of a really touristy area, it's going to be cheaper. But yeah, if cost of living is your concern, it's a kind of a blessing and a curse, but there's not a massive difference between each place.
Yeah, I think I saw a fascinating stat about the Philippines, and it talked about like the different income levels in the Philippines. And one stat that stuck with me was the typical doctor in the Philippines makes like 4,000 US a month. So, if you've got $4,000 a month of recurring income, you're basically living the standard of living of a doctor in that country, which is a pretty high standard of living.
Yeah.
And that in Australia would be considered median.
Yeah. The geographic arbitrage and all the different little quirks that come through it never fail to fascinate me, and it is very interesting. So
that's why you're living in Chiang Mai, mate.
yeah, exactly. Yeah,
it's a lot cheaper.
So, yeah, I
While we're on
never never wears off. Some things that I get jaded by. Sometimes I forget about how nice the weather is every day and whatnot. I have to remind myself. Like I look up the forecast back home and go, ha, I'm south. I live south of Melbourne, so it's like cold as it gets, really. But
Melbourne.
nevertheless, like I have to remind myself sometimes. But the cost of living and the whole geo arbitrage, like that's the one thing that never wears off. Every meal, every bubble tea, every taxi ride, I'm like, I can't believe that. Like,
My problem is every time I come back from holiday and I start buying lunches and drinks and stuff in Sydney, it's like, oh my God, this would have been $3 in Malaysia. This would have been
yeah, it
$2 in
hurts.
Thailand.
Yeah,
It's like,
I'm the same. Like I'll go get back from the airport, and in Melbourne, there's no train to the airport, which is the point. Which I'm not gonna get into, but nevertheless, you have to
yes,
get the bus into the city, and it's like
yes,
$20 for like a 20-minute bus ride. And
yes,
I'm
or
just
taxi.
cringing. I'm like, I pay that. That's how much I spend on like food and like over like 1.5, 2 days over here. I can't
Oh,
do it. Like it just hurts. Yeah.
where we are, we always taxi to the airport, and it's somewhere between $80 and $100. So you
Oof.
could live for a whole week on that in like one of these countries.
Yeah,
Okay,
it's
let's go over to Vietnam.
Yep. All right. Vietnam's a quick one because of the very bottom one. The visa options there are poor.
Yeah,
Um, the only people who really can live there long term, like realistically, are the people married to a Vietnamese person or English
children.
teachers.
Oh,
That's
English teachers. Yep.
pretty much about it, really. I guess there's smaller exceptions, but the people I know of who live there, it's basically it. It's teachers and people who are like married into a family there.
Yeah.
You've got the 3 month visas, they're back again. So if you want to go there short term, it's good. You can probably go there, once, twice a year and not have any problems. So Vietnam, it's good, it's awesome. I think everyone who goes there loves it.
Yeah.
You've got cost of living that's really low. It's possibly the lowest on the list.
Okay.
Expat community isn't huge, but for most people, it's not a huge problem. Most people coming over here, like most people, don't really want a gigantic expat community and just bunch of Westerners around you all the time anyway. So I put it on the list, the expat community, but it's usually not make or break because if you want to find other foreigners, there's always going to be a couple bars in town where they'll be hanging out or whatnot. English isn't as good in Vietnam as other places I've found.
Yep.
The people who do speak it are generally in the tourism industry. Transportation, I put it as average. It's not. I mean, average is an average, not as an average as in poor. Like it's decent. Um, it's just
No
not quite as
trains, are
well
there?
oiled as Thailand or Malaysia. So I couldn't really put it down as up at their level. But it's
Yep.
affordable and it works. Healthcare. It's not great. My mate got sick when we were over there traveling. We got
Yep.
a little doctor's clinic nearby that managed to sort him out. He wasn't too sick or anything, and it cost like almost nothing, and he got better. But it was very basic to say the least.
Mm.
What else we got? Yeah, the infrastructure's decent. Yeah, it's not terrible. Vietnam's quite in the middle of a lot of things. And yeah, safety's good. It's a bit more petty theft there than I think it kind of fits the stereotypes that people think when they get off the plane in like anywhere in Southeast Asia.
Yep.
But the only place I have experienced people trying to like rob me and whatnot is there.
Yep.
Mainly Saigon. Outside of there is pretty chill, really. I think like
Yeah, I
the
don't
rest
like
of the
Saigon.
it's so much,
Too
very
hectic.
intense.
Yeah.
Yeah, if that's your first place off the plane in Asia, which it
Yeah.
was to me the first time I came here, it's a baptism of fire.
Yeah.
Vietnam's cool. I'd recommend it, especially if say if you for you as an example, you're saying how you want to potentially move around for a bit
Mm.
before you settle down or move around. Definitely, it's a great place to go for a few months. There's lots of awesome places to visit there. But yeah, I like it. So I'd recommend it to people. Just bear in mind you're not going to be able to stay there long term unless you have make some significant life decisions. So
Yeah. That's a really good summary. And I think you're right. If I'm looking at the prices I'm just using Ho Chi Minh as an example, it seemed a little bit lower
yeah,
than the other Southeast Asian countries.
yeah, it's
And that's Ho Chi Minh.
marginally different, but yeah,
So if you went to one of the like smaller regional cities, that would be dramatically cheaper as well, like Hoi An
yeah.
or Hue.
Yeah, Da Nang is very popular too. I think Hue would be a good option. I think that's definitely underrated. I haven't lived there. I've just visited, but it's one of the places I visited in Vietnam that I thought I could live here. And
Yeah.
when I did look, it's extremely cheap. So yeah, definitely a cool option for anyone who's moving around. Be a great place to base yourself for a while. Anywhere in Vietnam is pretty awesome, really.
Let's have the second conference, the Offshore in Asia, year 2 in Vietnam.
Yep, perfect.
So we looked at these countries. We looked at these markets in a geographic country region. Maybe let's
Yep.
look at it from a segment region. So if you were talking to a retiree, what would be the best markets for them in terms of visas and the lifestyle that a retiree would be looking for?
Yeah. So retirees, I would say to them, you've got three main popular options. So Thailand, Malaysia, Philippines, probably 95% of retirees choose
Yep.
either of or any of them.
Yep.
Thailand and the Philippines have the most competitive visas. Both
Okay.
their visas have very, very modest requirements. They're very fair. Thailand, there's four retirement visas in Thailand. You have there's the LTR visa, which is the like more high net worth individuals. One of the subcategories is wealthy retirees. You need like $1 million in net worth. It's like 80,000 a year in investment income. So rules most people out straight away. But there's that as an option. It's a bit more bureaucratic. So a lot of people, even they qualify, would just go for one of the normal visas.
Yep.
And then you've got the O, OA, and the OX. Basically, the O is the most standard one. You apply for it in Thailand. The OA is similar, but you apply for it outside of Thailand. And the OX is a 5-year, but it's extendable by 5 more version. I don't recommend the OX to a whole lot of people, although some people do like the idea of the security. You have the option of the problem then you need, I've got the number, 3 million baht deposit. So that ends up being, how much is that? Anyway, it's like six figures roughly. It's some amount. Anyway, it's a large amount of capital to have tied up. And if you're a retiree relying on investment income or something like that for your money, it's not really worth it. You know, for if you put 3 million baht equivalent, things, what's that? Like, oh God, brain quick. 130,000 Aussie, something like that. Yep. I hope that's right. Nevertheless, 130,000 Aussie, if you're earning dividends on that, that's almost enough to meet the requirement for the other, the income requirement for the other retirement visas, the O or the OA. And so, yeah, you've kind of got that predicament there. So it ends up being either the O or the OA. What's the difference? So the O is from within Thailand, the OA is from outside Thailand, you apply for it. The problem with the OA, or some people call it a problem, is that you need Thai health insurance to apply for it.
Okay.
Currently, the O visa, you don't need it, but pre-COVID, they were talking about also making a requirement for that visa, which may happen in future. They've been talking about it here and there, but they haven't really committed to anything. The one thing I will say with that, if you're over 70, you then have the problem that if you're trying to get health insurance, which is a requirement, if you're over 70, you might not meet the lifetime guarantee from a particular insurance company because it needs to be in Thailand. So you need to sign up before 70 to get that lifetime guarantee. It depends on the company. Some at 60, some at 61. It's all arbitrary. But once you get to 70, it gets difficult. And if they're only going to cover you until you're, say, 75, after that you're probably not going to be able to stay here. So yeah, just watch out for that. But nevertheless, you've got those two options. They're great. As far as cost of living and healthcare, yeah, it's probably that or Malaysia is the best place for you. I think Thailand's easier to live cheaper than Malaysia, I think, because there's a lot more of an expat community in these smaller regional like cities like, say, Chang Mai or Chiang Rai, or even the more cheaper islands, like if you're on Koh Phangan or something, it's a bit more younger crowd there, but still you've got, you can be out in these more regional areas, you can get your beaches, you can get your mountains, whatever you want. With Malaysia, most people tend to hang out in either Kuala Lumpur or Georgetown. Yep. But yeah, that's subjective, so it just depends on your individual situation. But I think Thailand, probably for retirees, ends up being a tad cheaper. And there's just so much infrastructure here as far as, like I said before, visa agents and people like that to help you out, that make your life so much easier. Malaysia, the other option, or one of the other options, you've got the MM2H, which is what most retirees go for. There's also the Malaysian Premium Visa, which is more or less a copy of the Thai Elite Visa. So that's an option that you have nowadays. But the MM2H, it's less financially onerous. And we'll see when these new changes come, if they do, when they do, whatever. But that's the general gist for what people are going to go for in Malaysia, or the Sarawak alternative.
Did they copy the service that the Thai Elite had, where they meet you at the airport and they escort you through customs and you pick your bag and they take you through a chauffeured car back to your hotel? Did Malaysia copy that? I'm not
actually sure if Malaysia's what they've copied exactly. I know it's modeled off the program. I don't know if they've gone the whole to the full Monty of Thailand, kind of absurdity, lack of a better word. But they're copying it nevertheless. You even look at the website and they've kind of gone for a similar look and all that. But it's good to have that option there. And then there's the Philippines. So the Philippines also pretty competitive retirement visa.
Yeah.
It's it's a certain income requirement. I can't remember the exact amount, but it's pretty modest, even a little lower than Thailand's. Police check, which is standard with other things, and then maybe like a couple other things like that. But yeah, a few very simple things. They have a few different categories. There's the can't recall them exactly off the top of my head, but there's the standard ones, just for like the average retiree. There's a one on compassionate grounds if you require medical treatment and want to go to the Philippines. So again, common people from the States or whatnot, they have an option for that. That's a little bit easier to apply for. Then there's one for veterans that are like from countries that are allied with the Philippines. So you've got like a bunch of specific subcategories of retirement visas there that work to certain people's advantage. Nevertheless, all the categories, granted, you've got to be over 50, but all the categories are pretty easy to meet there as well. And again, very cheap, probably could be even cheaper than Thailand. I think some people say it is. Again, it's just so subjective and depends so much on your situation, but it's in a very affordable place. The only thing is, if you're looking at a similar being, assuming that I was, a retiree in that position, the only thing that would sway me towards Thailand and Malaysia over the Philippines is healthcare. It's just, it's slightly better in Thailand, quite a lot better in Thailand and Malaysia. And if you're of that age where you're going to need to start worrying about this stuff, it's a pretty good place to be. And one other thing while I'm on it to know, which is very important, is in a lot of situations, if you become a non-tax resident of Australia, you've been away for a while, after about 5 years, you can be cut off Medicare. And if you want to get Medicare back, you have to go back to Australia for 6 months and then it starts again. Again, check the specifics of that. But yeah, it's around 5 years. You can potentially get cut off Medicare. So if you're in that position, you might want to look into that situation because, because I know a few people, I've met a couple of people over here who've said to me like, oh yeah, it'll be sweet if I get sick, I'll just go back to Australia and like and do what for 6 months, like. So yeah, you got to like look into all the situations for these sort of things. If you're thinking of retiring somewhere over here, I would highly recommend talking to someone like us, because there's almost certainly something little that you haven't considered that might seem small now, but when you extrapolate it or when it plays out further, it could be a big issue down the track.
Yeah, and healthcare is absolutely critical. So let's pivot away from retirees. Let's talk about the next segment, which is the digital nomads. So assume someone is in their 20s, 30s, fit, healthy, young. They're quite adventurous. They're looking for like a decent expat community, good Wi-Fi, good infrastructure, and low costs. Where would you recommend?
Yeah, I think the main two places that demographic goes, or easily the main two places, is Thailand and Bali. Bali and the surrounding islands, Lombok and kind of Gili, all that kind of people too. But I just say Bali for simplicity's sake. Nevertheless, those two areas, if you're like looking to start a business, or you're like just bootstrapping it and trying to get by, those two places are going to be the most common options. If you like a community, especially if you're in your 20s, I think Bali's a great option. A lot of people love it. If you're in say Canggu or Ubud or Uluwatu, there's easily the highest concentration of like young Westerners over there. Most of them are working real hard. From my experience, having co-worked whatever in Thailand and then done the same thing in Bali, most people over in Thailand are a bit more established. It seems like they're working for a company else somewhere, or they're doing they're already set up. The people in Bali, a lot of them are just kind of starting their own business or bootstrapping or whatnot, or some of them are caught in pyramid schemes or whatnot. But most of them are just working through it. So if you're young and you're looking to get a bit of what's the word, be in like a like-minded community, Bali's probably the best bet for that. Thailand's also great if you like the idea of Bali and most things about it. It just seems a bit too busy or a bit too intense. Koh Phangan in Thailand's really awesome. I got a few friends down there who absolutely love it. And similar vibe. It's got that same kind of alternative chill scene, but it's just probably you've got 2 million people in Bali or something like that. There's probably 100,000 or something on Koh Phangan, so it's
not so hectic.
Way more chill. It's the same kind of vibe. But Bali's awesome. Like it's considering how busy it is and all that, it's so green and there's so many little quiet, calm nooks and beautiful sights and that. You get that down south in Thailand as well, and if you're in Pai up in northern Thailand, you can find that as well. I am partial to Chang Mai. I've been here for quite a while now. It's a great option, especially if you want to reduce your cost of living. It's about as cheap as it gets here. But without compromising on quality. Like one thing that some people back home ask me, oh, what do you do for food, or what do you do if you're this or that? And it's like, I don't know. What do you do back home? Same thing. Like, what do you do if you get sick? I'm like, I go to the doctor. It's particularly a place like this, like, an the islands or whatnot. If you're in somewhere a bit more remote, obviously sometimes it comes with its challenges, as it would in Australia or whatnot. If you're on an island there and need to see I don't know, a dermatologist, you might not be able to find one. But if you're in like a city, you're going to be able to manage. But yeah, I think for young people and nomads in general, I'd say Bali or Thailand they're popular for a reason. That's for sure.
Okay, so let's pivot to the next segment. So we've talked about retirees, we've talked about digital nomads. Think about like a couple with kids. They're still school-age kids. They're looking for something that's safe. They're looking for something that's, more closer to home. What would you recommend?
Yeah, so for that, I think the first thing that comes to mind is Malaysia.
Yeah, I think so too.
Yeah, a lot of people think that. When I have individuals or retirees say, I like Thailand, but it's not civilized enough. Okay, it's probably somewhere you'll find it's perfectly fine for you. With kids, though, I think Malaysia's just there's a different level of safety there, and culture there is just a bit more compared to all of Southeast Asia. The culture in Malaysia is a bit more. I love the word again. It's hard to find words that don't piss people off. It's a bit more it's civilized in a Western sense. Like, people aren't like, riding around on a motorbike with a kid without a helmet.
Yes.
And,
Oh, yes.
like swerving through traffic and running red lights because they didn't see any cars there.
Yes.
It's a bit more orderly in that sense, to my knowledge, there's plenty of good international schools there as well.
Yeah.
Obviously, the English language is more well spoken. Malaysia, for those who don't know, it's very culturally interesting because of British colonialism. You have all the Malays who've been there forever, for a long time. You have the Chinese who were brought there to mine tin, and the Southern Indians who were brought there to tap rubber. Mainly, there was different things. That's generally what happened. So even today, it's about 50% Malay, I think 30% Chinese and 20% Indian, and they're all Malaysians living there. So you have a very interesting mix of different people, which brings in their own food and culture and whatnot. I think for some people raising kids, that could be a factor as well. Just being in a place a bit more diverse like that. Malaysians generally I found are very nice, very genuine. It's an extremely safe place. Just from walking around anecdotally, feel very comfortable there. There's a lot of tolerance, obviously being a country of different people. You've got different religions and languages and cultures and whatnot. And I think if you've got a family, again, it's hard for me to speak. I'm a young bloke in my 20s, but Malaysia would be probably the best bet for that. And it's a bit more orderly, particularly KL or Penang or Georgetown, sometimes people refer to as.
Yep.
Those two places are great. If KL sounds a bit big and a bit busy, Penang's a great option. It's still really well connected. It's a bit more chill. You've got a lot going on there still. Like, it's not going to be boring. There's plenty of schools there as well, I believe. Sorry, clear my throat. But yeah, I'd say Malaysia. I guess, like, again, if money isn't a factor, Singapore's great. But for most people, when it comes to living in Singapore, money will become a factor. It's very expensive. And yeah, I kind of nowhere else that would compare, at least go onto Malaysia's level, I think, with that.
Sorry, I think I dropped out a second.
No, that's fine.
So Malaysia.
Yeah, I'd say.
I appreciate that. I think we've covered off pretty much the main target segments of the savvy audience. Tell me, how would the guys find out more about offshore in Asia, what you guys do and the services you provide?
Well, I'd say the YouTube channel is probably a good start. Just look up Offshore in Asia in YouTube and you'll find us. We'll come up. We've got everything in playlists broken down. If you're interested in a particular country, you can go check that out. We break down things like visas as well, quite well, I dare say. Like we try just spit out what we need to say and make a video as pragmatic and helpful as possible. We don't need to waffle about our own political opinions and thoughts and whatnot. We just say this is the requirements. If you meet them, get in
Yes.
touch. So yeah, I'd say start with a YouTube channel. We've also got quite a few articles on the website, it's offshoreinasia.com. And yeah, if you want to get in touch, just send us an email through there, or you can book a call via our Calendly through the website. And yeah, they're probably the best bets. That's where I'd go.
Yep.
But yeah, that's it.
Awesome. We're about 2 years away from Fire. I'll definitely give you a buzz beforehand just
Yeah,
to
awesome.
prep for most likely Malaysia or Thailand. But we'll definitely reach out for help.
Yeah,
Thank you for
awesome.
your time tonight, Matt. Really appreciate that.
No
And
worries.
we'll post a couple of links to your website and YouTube when I post this up on Savvy. Thanks for
All
your
right,
time.
sounds great. All right, thanks.
Cheers, Flynn.